Hi everyone, and welcome to our Meridian Energetics channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mel, and I'm here in this video to talk about our healing modality, Meridian Energetics. And what I'd like to do in this first video, as I am the founder of the modality, I'd like to give you some background on the modality and how it came into being. And about 20 years ago, I began having spontaneous out-of-body experiences, and I started going to a classroom somewhere in the etheric planes. Very many people travel there nowadays, probably more so now than they did in the past, but in any case, I was moved to this particular classroom, and there were at the time, as I recall, 5 other people that were there. There were 3 beings that represented the teaching staff. They were, if I can describe them, gender neutral. They looked human and in humanoid form, and all communication from them was done telepathically. And what I mean by that is we actually heard it directly in the middle of our head, translated into words, and in some cases a lot of pictures. And basically they gave us the information that at the time that the Earth was going through a tremendous amount of change, and also a very large amount of acceleration of the evolutionary process. Some people like to call that Kundalini awakening. And as such, there would be some new avenues or new approaches to doing energy work or healing work on the planet. And one of the biggest things that they made apparent to us was that during the process of this evolution, we were going to be evolving from a 7-chakra system to a 12-chakra system within the physical body. From a 7 to a 12, but directly, linked to the physical body. Now, in order for the healing modalities to be able to go through a shift, which a great many have not, and I'm not criticizing other modalities, but the biggest majorities of our modalities on the planet, even now, today, are still based on a 7-chakra system. This modality is based on a 12-chakra system. And the other thing that they explained to us, those of us who were picked, I guess, or selected, whatever you want to call it, to go to this classroom, was 1, we had extremely sensitive nervous systems, and 2, we were not cluttered up with predominantly the educational system as it had been presented to most people on the planet. In other words, relatively speaking, we were uneducated to a point. Not illiterate, but uneducated, and having gone through the total of the system. Basically, the system that they taught to us was based on the premise that all of the problems that existed in the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, existed in the etheric body as the point of origin, and that these point of origins could be labeled or put in a format of being called a template or an energetic template that had been passed from one generation to the other, one ancestral pattern to the other, or one culture, one race, and so on and so on and so on. And that basically the modality that they were going to show us was to how to work with specifically the etheric body and to remove these patterns and templates in a very admittable fashion. The situation was as such that this went on for a period of, I think as I recall, about several months, 2 or 3 times a week, depending upon the hours that I was working. I would shift immediately as I got into bed and fell asleep. It actually started happening after the first initial phase of after I went to sleep. I would go to the school in the dream state and then have full retention of what took place during the course of that particular point in time. And basically what they would do is, to simplify the whole of the process, is they would manifest different bodies. Now, I'm not talking about the physical body. I'm talking about the etheric body, the mental body, the emotional body, and all of the what you call the astral body, the etheric body, the subtle bodies, and all of those sheath bodies that were contained within in variations of what they were. And they would show us where this particular situation would exist. For example, this particular point in time on our planet, one of the major issues is sexual abuse, which seems to be rampant in almost every culture and every family and every ancestral pattern or tree. And they would show us where it existed within the etheric body, which one of the subtle bodies it was in, and how to break up the pattern or to let it go and remove it, in some cases directly from the individual that was going on. Now, in a lot of cases, this would entail what some people might call psychic surgery, where what you would be doing is they also taught us how to raise our vibration enough in the physical body that we would be able to take, for example, our etheric hand or our etheric fingers and actually, how would I say it, pop it out of our hand and actually push our etheric fingers or our hand directly into the physical body and access the etheric body and do the work in that fashion. They did this on so many different layers and so many different levels that it was kind of mind-boggling, to say the least, to absorb all of this and to put it into perspective of bringing it into three-dimensional reality. The other thing that they did was, so as not to overload all of the people that were there taking the class, was they would, as they called it, downloaded us in our 12 chakra system, because at that time we were already templated, to use that word, or we had an energetic template of a 12 chakra system which was directly very close to our physical body, not integrated or incorporated as of yet. But what they also said is they had downloaded additional information, perspectives, knowledge, and everything else that we needed to know into those particular chakras, and they would activate once we had continued along with the evolutionary process and evolved to a certain point where we were capable mentally and emotionally of absorbing them and understanding them. We would have access to the information, and this is exactly what happened. Over the course of the years afterward, periodically I would get intense downloads of information in addition to the modality as it was taught to us. Now, the one thing that they didn't do was they did not teach any one particular of us how to put it in a format that would be applicable to presenting it to people here in physical reality. Basically, they were teaching us the actual mechanics of the modality and showing us how to do this and how to do that, where this problem exists or this mental disorder existed or that. And then what would happen is we would get to practice this on what I call, well, what they used to do is kind of a really, kind of a real culture shock thing, is what they would do is they had this habit of, they would simply, we worked on these, they were kind of like oblong tables. It looked something like an egg, and they kind of floated in the air. They didn't really have anything that's kind of anchored them to the floor or anything, just kind of floated in the air about waist high. And what they would do is they would manifest one of these particular subtle bodies on it, whichever one that was required for the lesson that was being given, and they would show us how to work with it, how to change certain things around, how to move certain energies. And this was done repeatedly over a period of 6 months. And They didn't give us a manual, and they didn't give us instructions as to how to put it all together. From what I understood, that was our issue as to how we were going to put it all together once we became more aware of it and started to put it into a physical structure. But they did emphasize two very important things, and I want to mention them here in this first video, that in order to continue with the modality, what has happened with most modalities is they have a manual. And in this particular modality, I don't have a manual, and I am never going to have one, not as long as I'm on this planet at least. And the reason for that is in developing a practitioner, I try to get them to function more in their intuition, establish a connection with their higher self, and go in that direction as opposed to reading out of a manual in regards to techniques and applications, because then what happens is it becomes linear and it becomes very focused and it doesn't evolve and grow as we're growing and evolving at this particular point. An example, case in point of that, and just for the reference of this video, having been here for a period of time and having had well over 20 years since this modality was taught to us in the fashion that it was taught, I have noticed a major shift in Kundalini awakenings and spiritual awakenings as a whole. And the shift when I started, which was when I was 37, I'm now 70, which is a considerable period of time. You had an active Kundalini awakening start with the throbbing tailbone, the sore tailbone, the energy and the fire going up the back into the head, and so on and so on. And that was it. And at that time, that was how it started. And usually 3, 4, or 5, or sometimes even later, years later, you actually would have a heart center awakening. Well, what's happened in the last 10 years is we now have people who are now experiencing a Kundalini awakening, rising up the spine, and also an intense heart center activation at the same time. And what's happening is the whole of the thing has changed. So this modality over the years has adapted and changed with the evolutionary process that is unfolding. And this is one of the major features of it. And this is why there is no written manual. There are some drawings and diagrams that I present to the practitioner, but it's not in a manual form. I think this is a very important feature. It helps develop the intuition and the connection to higher self. Now, once it had been presented, what I had to do, being the founder, is I had to put it into something that would be feasible and workable to teach it to people here. Initially, when I started out, what I did was I sat down and on, I think it was a particular Saturday afternoon in about 4 hours, I wrote a complete unfoldment for a 3-day workshop to teach this modality. And I compressed a lot of material into a very short space of time. And what I used to do is I used to have anywhere from 6 to 10 people come to our accommodations that we had at the time. They would stay for a 3 to 4 day workshop, and I would give them excuse me, all of this material in that workshop, plus give them the hands-on training. And what I found out, what I ended up with was practitioners who were practitioners, but the quality of the practitioners on the training that they had wasn't to my standards. It wasn't the people's fault. It was just not good enough for me. So what I have done is I have changed the modality now, and I don't do it in a workshop format. I do it in a one-on-one format, extended over a period of several months, in some cases, for people to get through it. And it's a one-on-one, you and me, doing the modality together in that particular space of time. So the idea with the modality, again, as I mentioned here, as I want to end this video at this particular point, is the prime focus is on working directly with the etheric body. The training that I received is in response to working directly with the etheric body and the subtle bodies. Now, one other point that I wanted to mention here also in this first video because of the incorporation of this 12 chakra system, which is now becoming almost standard equipment for a large majority of the population, even down to where it's now being brought into existence in youngsters, young children, especially, teenagers, that it's being brought in, is the information in correlating in the unfoldment of these people and the modality is now come together in that particular aspect. So this is the first video that I'm going to be doing that will give you the general schematics of the modality, and I thank everybody for listening to it here. I will be presenting right after this one 2 or 3 more where I get down into more of the nitty-gritty of the modality. Thank you very much, everyone.